That moment was very clear to me because I was, at the time, a freelance writer. I was writing and publishing pieces with newspapers and magazines. And I think, like so many writers, I thought, I need to get published by the New York Times. You have to be pretty by some external definition that most of us could never fit because it's very narrow.
I do relate with, all the love that you're wanting externally. You need to learn how to give it to yourself.
Hello and welcome to Humanize the Hustle. Here we believe that health and happiness is non-negotiable.
Hey, welcome back to Humanize the Hustle. Today we're diving deep into a story of healing, self-discovery, and revolutionary awakening with our remarkable guest, author Ashley Jordan. Ashley is an accomplished journalist, speaker, former attorney, and mother of three, whose work has been featured in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Teen Vogue, and many other prominent publications. Today, she joins me to talk about her latest memoir, Unhappy Achiever, a powerful and intimate exploration of what happens when we summon the courage to step out from behind the mask of the good girl and embrace the joy of being perfectly imperfect. In Unhappy Achiever, Ashley confronts the myth that women can and should have it all. We're often sold this bill of goods, believing that happiness will come if we achieve the right degree, marry the right person, buy the perfect home, and climb the ladder of success. But as Ashley discovered, no matter how much we strive for external validation, genuine satisfaction remains elusive. The parts of us we try to fill with wealth, power, and praise can feel even emptier until we realize that the most fundamentally key to our happiness lies in inner fulfillment. Ashley's life took a dramatic turn shortly after her 37th birthday, when an unexpected event cracked her open, forcing her to confront the trauma she had buried for years. Through her journey of healing and self-discovery, she found that everything she needed to be, she already was. Her memoir is an invitation to women everywhere to break free from the shackles of societal achievement norms that keep us disconnected from our true selves, and to discover the magic, wisdom, and wholeness that comes when we stop chasing external success and embrace our inner worth, creativity, and self-love. If you've ever felt disconnected from your true self, struggled with the relentless pursuit of success, or wondered how to heal the deep wounds that shape your identity, this episode is for you. Get ready to be inspired by Ashley's courageous story of healing, courage, and finding joy in imperfection. Welcome, Ashley.
Thank you, Alicia. What a beautiful introduction. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here with you.
It's all so true. And you very graciously gave me your audiobook to listen to. And I know I sent you an email with all of the feelings I felt listening to every chapter as you told your story and your experience. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting as I was thinking about the book afterwards is that for women, there's many times where we come of age, right? There's all like these coming of age stories. And I felt like for women, it happens almost like each decade, right? It's like there's these coming of age when you're younger, kind of going from being a teenager or maybe even being a child to a teenager and then a teenager into adult. And then there's this phase that women go through, and we'll talk about it later. And I forgot what you called it, but I've been calling it the feral 40s, where you just you go and you take an inventory of your life and you're like, yeah, no, actually, no. And it's like pretty intense. And I could relate with so much of what you said on so many different levels. And I know so many people are going to just love what you're sharing and can relate to it so much. And so where I thought we might want to start is like, when was the moment that the Unhappy Achiever became like the story you knew that you needed to write and share with people?
Sure. Well, that moment was very clear to me because I was, at the time, a freelance writer. I was writing and publishing pieces with newspapers and magazines. And I think, like so many writers, I thought, I need to get published by the New York Times, right? It's like the holy grail of bylines. Once I am published by the New York Times, I will feel like I've made it, like I'm legitimate as a writer, and like I'll be content, right? I thought I would have this feeling of satisfaction, right? of no longer being on this sort of hamster wheel of one thing from one thing to the next. And so I published with the New York Times, and I did so in a way that was actually really beautiful and personal to me. And so that dream for me manifested in a way that was even more incredible than I could have imagined. And yet, when I finally had that moment and I saw my name published, I felt nothing. I didn't feel what I thought I would feel. And instead, it was even worse. I didn't feel anything. I felt numb. And so I turned to, the most hallowed source of modern wisdom for all of us, Google. I Google searched in a moment of sheer desperation and like, what's wrong with me? Like, I've done the thing that I felt like I needed to do to feel like legitimate and validated, and I feel nothing. And so I typed, what does it mean when you achieve a major accomplishment and you feel nothing, into my Google search box? And immediately it returned, the first article that popped up said, "Are you an unhappy achiever?" And it was this gut reaction of, yes, I think that I am. And I realized in that moment that unhappy achiever was actually a lens through which I could pretty much view my entire 37 years of existence, from early childhood to the present day. I had learned to use achievement to earn love and approval. And that had been sort of an undercurrent driving me through my entire life, actually. So that was the moment.
And then you decided, like, this is my story. And then did you sit down and you're like, okay, I'm just going to start to write? And did it, tell me about that process a little bit. I'm interested in that.
So it's always funny to answer this question because, I actually had a woman tell me about 6 months before I started writing the book that, she said something about me writing a book. And I said, oh, yeah, that's something that I'm going to do. But in my mind, I thought, it's like 10 years down the line, right? And she just looked at me. She goes, I think it's sooner than you think. And 6 months later, I wrote the first chapter to Unhappy Achiever. But, I sort of had the awareness that I was an unhappy achiever in June of 2021, but I didn't start, June of 2022, but I didn't start writing the first chapter till several months later. And it wasn't this, it was just this gut feeling of this knowing that washed over me, like, it's time to write a book and I have a story to tell and this is what I'm supposed to do now. And it wasn't something that I had thought about a lot beforehand. It was just this awareness that washed over me that it was time and that I had a journey that needed to be shared. And I didn't know exactly, how it was going to all come together. I truly didn't know what chapters fully that I would write. And in fact, many of the chapters I was actually living almost as I was writing them. So the closeness that you might feel when you're reading it is real because I was in or just outside of a lot of the experiences and the lessons that I write about in the book, actually.
Mm-hmm. I can definitely, as you're explaining your process and how you got started, I could definitely understand how all the little different pieces might have been coming together as you were going through them, which is super cool to consider. And something that comes up a lot on this podcast and something that has become very much something that I feel into my 40s is the fuck yes and the fuck no energy. I call it, where your book was like a whole body, fuck yes, I'm writing a book, right? Yes, and then at the same time, you were going through all these things that we'll get into, which were absolutely actually, fuck no. Yeah, that's a full body, either yes or no. And I feel like as women, something happens chemically in our 40s to where we're like yes and no. like especially no. Yes, yes too, but I feel like also no becomes like a very complete statement to where we're like full body, like you're like moving a boulder at this point once I decide no. So as you were talking, I was like, oh, there's another one for the fuck yes and the fuck no strategy that I like to share with people.
Yes.
So yeah. Okay. Sorry, I was going to ask one other question. Were you going to respond?
No, go ahead, please.
Okay. So one of the things that I really love that you go into that's also really relatable in your book is that you dive deep into the masks that women wear or the masks that we wear, especially for women. And you talk a lot about this, the Midwestern good girl persona and that mask and the pressure that you felt when you were wearing that mask. And so explain a little bit of that, like what that is for people who might not know what, the good girl Midwest thing is, and then how you slowly broke free from that.
Sure. Well, for me, it was I realize now that from early childhood that I used goodness, being very good, meaning, fitting sort of the narrow boxes that are prescribed for so many women, right? You have to be pretty by some, external definition that most of us could never fit because it's very narrow. You have to be pleasing. You have to be often quiet, right? You sort of lose your voice somewhere along the way. And you have to seek approval. Your parents have to approve of you. And so for me, I realized that I was constantly, I think I learned early on that some aspects of me were not good, according to, even my relatives' definition of good. And so I learned to be a lot more subdued. I silenced myself. I learned to be a chameleon. I learned to sort of shapeshift and be who I thought other people wanted me to be in the context of social situations. And I not only stopped speaking my truth, but I lost sight of my truth altogether. And I lost sight of who I even was behind all of the boxes and sort of the personas that I had and the masks that I had to assume to earn love and approval. And so I realized that I never even got the chance to get to know myself behind the mask until I was, 37 years old. And so the past 4 years for me have been not just taking off the mask, but getting to know the woman that exists behind it, because I truly did not know who I was. I didn't know this, for most of my life. But now I realize I really didn't know myself at all.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That was something that was really relatable to me, and something that I talk a lot about in my coaching is like your true self with a capital S. Mm-hmm. And, you come into this world very pure and very much yourself. And then society tells you that that's wrong or to be something else. And there's this whole journey of going back to like who you were before society told you to be something else. And what a beautiful exercise to be able to go through. And I, hope that more and more people get inspired to really take the time to reconnect with themselves, because we go through this journey of like, and a lot of this stuff I've also realized comes back to us wanting to feel safe and accepted. And my next question is going to go into the mother wound and the relationship with your mother, and how much that influenced the good girl stuff. But a lot of it's us, we're born and then society puts all of these things on us in our brain, like we're not good enough and we need to look this way, or we need to act this way, or we need to do this to fit in. And then we strive for this independence. So we kind of, in order to conform, in order to succeed, we put on these masks, we develop these personas, and then you get to a point of being like, oh, that was never really me. That's not what my heart wants. That's not what my gut wants. And again, I think it's this weird chemical thing that happens in our 40s for women, where I know so many women who are really like pausing and being like, oh, like, how did I get this far? And this is what I'm doing. And like, I never questioned it. Like, what is going on? And there's so much encouragement and freedom in what you share that really encourages women to like take the time to get to know you, because this is like your one and only beautiful life. And you don't want to live it as somebody else. And I love that, you know, in trauma, your trauma triggered that in you, and this whole process after you came to terms with the trauma that you had to heal, but can definitely like related so much with that.
And I want to say too, because I think it's really important that what we grow up with all these prescriptions and these very narrow boxes that we feel pressured to fit into. And what I realized is that once I separated myself from the personas, from the masks, once I broke free of the boxes, the me that I actually was so much more interesting than the me that I had constructed. And my ability to go out into the world and have meaningful interactions and meaningful experiences with other people flowed so much more easily and effortlessly when I was just being me. And it took so much less energy than wearing a mask, because all I have to do, whether I'm here with you now or, you know, on the couch with my family or wherever I am, I just have to be me. And that's easy, right? Being perfect, fitting into a box, being who you think other people want you to be takes so much energy. And those versions of ourselves are often so much more boring, so much less beautiful and interesting than the versions of us we were when we were born. So I think that that's really important to understand, is that somewhere along the way we get taught that there was something wrong with us that we had to hide. And I need to say, you know, to every woman listening to this, there is nothing wrong with you, and there never was. And the you that you were born to be is so much more magical than the you that you were taught to be.
And would you agree that if you are in situations or around people that make you feel that you are hard to love or that you need to change something about yourself, that those just like you need to come to terms, they're just not your people?
They are not your people. They are not. The people who are for you are the ones who hold a space for you where you can show up as your most unfiltered, authentic self and love you unconditionally. The magical, the messy, and the in-between. They wrap you in warmth and wisdom and just a space of absolute unconditional love. And I think for me, the more that I found the courage and was brave enough to be myself, the more my people found me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So this actually kind of segues into the relationship you had, I think, with your mother. Do you talk to your mom anymore?
I do.
Book? You do. Okay. Yes. I couldn't tell if you still had a relationship with your mother, or you maybe had put a boundary up to not talk to her as much. But so your relationship with your mother definitely is a theme throughout the book. And in terms of some of the things that you share in the book around the way that you and your mom interacted and some of the ways that she made you feel, like what would be in relating it to your relationship with your mother to what we were just talking about around like being around people who didn't make you feel great and put weird parameters on you, especially at that age? Like, talk a little bit about your relationship with your mother and how you got to the other side of that, if you are still talking to her, and like, how do you deal with kind of that? Maybe talk a little bit about it so people know what I'm even talking about, in terms of the role your mother played, how it shaped your personal growth, and then maybe how you healed from that and can have a relationship with her today.
Well, first I want to say that, yes, I absolutely am in communication with my mother, and I love my mother very much. I love my mother unconditionally, And she is a wonderful mother and a wonderful human. And like all of us, she is another woman's child, and she's doing the very best that she can. And I say that because my mother has been one of my greatest teachers. And for that, I am eternally grateful, because it has taught me that, my mother could not offer me a perfect mother or a perfect parent any more than I can offer the same to my children. The best I can do is to keep learning and growing. And when I know better, to do better, right? And so, but for me, growing up, I think I felt, I say in the book, I knew my mother loved me. I just wasn't sure if she liked me. Mm-hmm. And it was like this persistent feeling from a young age of, I just don't know if she likes me very much, right? And also, I think a craving for a sort of maternal love and nourishment that I just didn't always feel from her. And as I share in the book, when I really, reckoned with that in myself and that reality of my past and my life, I realized that my mother was raised by my grandmother, who lost her own mother when she was 9. My great-grandmother died when my grandmother was 9. And so my grandmother didn't have a mother for most of her childhood. And so that realization showed me that, what I was seeking from my mother in terms of, a certain kind of maternal love and nourishment, she likely never received from her own mother, who was raised without a mother for half of her, for most even of her childhood. And so I think that that's really important for us to remember, is that every woman is another woman's child, and we cannot give to anyone, even our own children, what we do not have or know, right? And so I say that because it allowed me to realize that whatever hard, hurtful things that I felt, or whatever lack I experienced in my relationship with my mother, had nothing to do with me. Because I think we internalize that often as children as, there's something wrong with me. Why can't she love me, right? Why can't she offer? There must be something wrong with me. And so the reason that that chapter is entitled Wombs and Wounds is because when we start to see our mothers as another woman's child, when we start to hold space for their humanness, it doesn't make anything okay, but it allows us to understand that whatever we experienced has to do with their wounds and nothing to do with us or something being wrong with us. And I think that that's really important. And for me, I call my mother one of my greatest teachers, because when you don't have, when you experience something that feels like lack in your relationship with a parent, there's an opportunity to teach yourself how to be the mother to you that you never had. So instead of spending more energy wishing my mother could be other than who and how she is, I started focusing on giving myself that which my mother could not give me. And that is empowering. And so because of my experience, I have actually had to learn to nourish and nurture myself more deeply than maybe somebody else who hasn't had that experience. And that is, in its own way, a gift.
Mm-hmm. And so how old are your kids again?
My oldest is 12, and my second oldest is 9, and my youngest is 6.
Yeah. And so in realizing these things, as you were healing and making sense of the relationship you had with your mom, and you were self-healing and self-soothing and supporting yourself, do you feel like that helped you show up in a different way for your children? And so maybe breaking generational cycles so that they won't necessarily have, so the reason I ask that is because I had a similar experience with my mom. I didn't even know she loved me or liked me, but And she's not around anymore. So I didn't get the chance to kind of clear anything with her. But I do relate with, all the love that you're wanting externally. You need to learn how to give it to yourself. And, in my hope was that by doing all this work, and it's also, I want to say, it's so hard to be doing this work and giving you all the things that you need. And you have 3 kids. I've got 2 kids. And, so trying to be like, I need like 4 hours of self-care a day to really do what I need to do for myself. But, that's like really hard to find. I mean, I can only wake up at early enough in the morning to try to fit it in. But yeah, and I've just been thinking like all this work that I'm doing and all these things that I'm going through and all these things that I'm recognizing, my purpose is like the generational trauma, like, I don't want to say it stops with me. I'm not that powerful, but at least it is not going to, I'm going to clear generational timelines as much as I can so that as little as possible will continue on. And so in acknowledging that, I feel like, and my question to you was, do you feel like you are able to show up in a way for your children that your mom wasn't able to show up for you?
I hope so. I'm trying my absolute best. And I think one thing that I want to say and to respond to your question is, yes, absolutely. The work that I've done in the context of my relationship with my own mother and my maternal line and lineage more broadly has absolutely impacted my relationship with my children, but so has every other aspect and part and parcel of my own healing journey and journey of growth and transformation. Mm-hmm. Every bit of the work that I have done to come home to my heart space and myself has made me a better mother. Mm-hmm. And maybe better isn't even the right word, a more unconditionally loving, present mother who can hold a space that I don't think I could hold before, even though I was dedicating myself to my children for most of their lives, actually. And even then, doing my absolute best and for a long time, making them my sole focus day in and day out. There were so many parts of me that were unconscious. I just did not, my heart was closed, although I didn't know it. So I was loving them with every cell of my being and to the best of my ability. But my heart wasn't open fully. And so now being able to show up for them, in my fullest expression and not perfectly imperfect, and also showing them that, right? I think before I felt that pressure to be a perfect mother, and that was my focus. And now I understand that doesn't really exist. Nobody has a perfect parent, and I don't expect myself to be perfect, but I do expect myself to listen to my children as best as I'm able to, and to try my very best every day and to learn. And when I make a mistake, to admit my mistake and try to do better the next time, right? And it's what I teach my children, and it is now the standard that I hold myself to, but I'm learning all the time in every aspect of my life, including as a mother. And I don't think that will ever stop.
Yeah, definitely doesn't. They just keep on getting older and have different things happening with them. So we think we have it all figured out, and then everything changes.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. So I think, but healing, I mean, it will impact every aspect of our lives, every aspect of our identity. And I am very proud of the work that I've done and the way that I am able to show up for them. Now, It is not perfect, but it is a whole lot better than before, even though I didn't know that I needed, you know what I mean? I think when we're doing our best, we don't know that there's maybe a different way. But now that I see the differences in me, I'm grateful that I'm able to offer, I am able to live with an open heart. And now I'm able to offer my children a mother with a fully open heart.
Yeah.
And that is something I'm really thankful for.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about grief. You cover grief in a really relatable way in the book. And maybe you could talk a little bit about, and so when you came and realized the grief that you needed to heal and the trauma you needed to heal from something that had happened in your childhood, that came after you decided to write the book? Like, did that realization came after you started writing or before?
No, it came about actually a little over a year before, probably about 15 months before.
Okay. And so a couple things I want to set up for is maybe you could tell a little bit about what happened, just to give context for people who are listening of what that trauma was and how it kind of fits into your story of the unhappy achiever and healing from things. And then also, I know in chapter 16, I would love for people to get a little taste of what your beautiful writing style is like. So if you could share an excerpt from that chapter in the book, and then maybe we can just talk a little bit about grief following that.
Absolutely. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to share about my own grief experience, because I think what is always beautiful for anybody who's lost someone who was beloved to them is, no matter how long it's been, to have the opportunity to, speak their life back into existence. And so for me, the person that I lost who was beloved to me, his name was Daniel. And we were friends, and as romantic as kids could be, from the age of about 6 years old until I turned 13. And on my 13th birthday, he was killed very suddenly and tragically in an accident. And so pretty much the day exactly that I became a woman, that I turned 13, someone who had been such a pivotal part and played such a pivotal role in my childhood was gone. And, growing up in the Midwest, and not just the Midwest, I think that this is true for people, all over the country, grief is not something people know how to deal with. And it's especially so when it is a sudden death, and it is especially so when it is someone who is young and dies well before their time. And so for me, my parents had planned this surprise 13th birthday party, which is what I write about in this chapter. And, we received the news, the phone call, right? Those moments that we never forget, right? Whatever that is for us, the phone call, the doorbell ring, the moments that imprint themselves on our hearts and our psyches forever. We received the phone call that morning, and then, I had to attend a surprise birthday party and smile and be happy when I was burning with grief and sorrow and pain and trauma inside in a way that my 13-year-old self almost couldn't. It is one of those moments where you when we got the call and I went to my mother told me the news and hung up the phone, I just walked to my bedroom, and it's one of those moments where you drop to the floor and then it all goes black. Like you can't remember anything because you're in a place of just, pure pain, trauma. And so I call that chapter where I write about that day, Midwestern Nice, because I had to go to my party a few hours later and smile and be Midwest, be happy. Everybody was expecting me, right? And so
I didn't realize that was the same day in the book.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Wow. And so I think, in that moment as a child, right, as a 13-year-old girl, you're looking around thinking, what do I do? How do I absorb this? How do I process this? And everyone is just stoic, smiling even at your birthday party. And so you're like, oh, we don't deal with it. That's what we do. We stuff it down and we keep moving and we smile, right? And I think so many people have that experience. And I think that's, when I look back at what were the things that caused me to become a 37-year-old woman whose heart was closed and who felt mostly numb, those experiences, right? The experiences where I was taught to be numb, right? Rather than feelings that would have been extremely appropriate and healthy to feel and to express. And so that is what I write about in chapter 16 of the book, Midwestern Nice. And I'd like to read the excerpt, if that's okay.
Please.
Okay. Allowing grief in its fullest form isn't just a means of mourning a death. It's an act of self-love. Surrendering when waves of sadness wash over us cleanses our spirit. Resisting, suppressing, or bottling it up are futile attempts to avoid suffering. In the long term, they make us miserable by requiring us to detach from the tenderness at the root of our pain. Losing touch with our grief means losing touch with our lost love. We become hardened, disengaged from ourselves and others because our capacity to connect is more surface than substance. To rage, to weep, to be in a body that aches with so much emotional anguish, you wish you could step outside of it for a moment of respite. These states of being are more than just temporary. They're pyres on which we incinerate what no longer serves us. They're sacred altars of growth, empathy, understanding, compassion, and wisdom. They often arise before the best versions of us are born. But this process isn't only a rebirth. It can also be a remembering, a trigger to refresh our recollection of who we used to be before we let the fear of hurting too much turn us to stone. It's the matchstick that lights the fire of unbecoming, melting away the injuries that compelled us to become unhappy achievers to begin with. Untamed fires aren't predictable, tempered, and neat. Life can be hard, and it's cruel to expect people to be pleasant when burning would be more appropriate. Sometimes burning is in our best interest. Sometimes burning is better than extinguishing emotions asking for attention. Sometimes burning is the bridge between a painful past and a fuller, freer future.
I love that part. And it really spoke to me, as so many things did in your book, because my experience with grief has been the same as yours, of just being surrounded by people who just act really strangely. And, you're like, wait, what's going on? And it also kind of goes back to parents, right? Parents giving you the support you need, giving you the space that you need, and them not knowing what to do either, right? Like they probably thought, oh, we want to keep everything normal, and we want to, oh man. And so as you are in your late 30s and you start to realize that like, hey, this is unprocessed grief. Like I need to do something about this. What was that process like? Like, how did you, and I know the grieving process is going to be different for everybody, but in letting some of that like rage and anger out, because there's like in grief, like people think you're just sad, but there are parts of it where you are ragey, you are like so angry. And so maybe talk a little bit about the process and how you unpacked it and how you might even do things differently. And I don't know if you've had the opportunity with your children to support them through something like that, but, talk a little bit about your process.
Sure. So for me, it wasn't necessarily a realization that I had as much as an unexpected triggered my grief.
Yeah.
24 years. And suddenly I was grieving as if it had happened yesterday. And I truly had no idea what was happening to me. And I went to talk to a therapist, and I remember saying to her, what's wrong with me? This happened 24 years ago, and I feel as if it had happened yesterday. And she looked at me and she said, nothing's wrong with you, Ashley. She's like, grief doesn't go away just because we don't deal with it. And so for me, frankly, at the beginning, when that pain started pouring out of me, it was dark, right? It was quiet. It was lonely. And I say in the book, like, for the first time in my life, I'd been going through life like Alexander Hamilton, like writing like I'm running out of time, right? And from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. And I thought, if I only lived once, then, I had a finite period of time. And so I was running through my life. And what grief did is it knocked me down to the ground overnight. I went from running to like filled with so much emotional anguish and pain that I was almost incapacitated. Like, I couldn't do, for the first time in my life, I was in so much pain that I couldn't do anything. And the irony is that it was in the moment where I was incapacitated by grief and sorrow that I had the space and the solitude to actually start to see myself for the first time. And then, like you said, though, after sort of wading through, some of the pain and the sadness, right, that came pouring out, it transitioned to, anger at some point. I write about that in the book too, like a moment where rage, right, just came out of me, and the feeling of like being abandoned, And so it is a process. And it is, the other thing I want to say about grief is that it is so layered. We think, like, I can't tell you how many times in the past 4 years where I would see it come up again and be like, what is happening, right? I dealt with this, but healing for us, whatever it is like an onion. So like we deal with like one layer, and then there's like a little while later, another layer comes up to be healed. And I want to say that to people, because don't feel discouraged, right? If you've been working on healing parts of your past for a long time and you see them coming up, because they will always be coming up in a way that's more nuanced, in a way that's a little different from before. And it's just another level, another layer asking for attention.
Yeah. I think also I'll add on to that, and let me know if you agree, that grief is not just for when people pass. Like, I think you can grieve a lot of different things. And I have been able to relate grief to things like my children getting older and me grieving them being little. I've related grief to things that like haven't, like dreams I've had that have passed me by and haven't worked out. Relationships that were, people who are still alive that I will never be able to have a relationship with because of one reason or the other. And like, I feel like grief is just, there's a lot of things that can be really painful to process. And for me, I've been able to recognize, no, that's grief. That's something I need to sit with and process it. So I call like a lot of things grief. Yes. Because I don't know that I have like something else to call it, but I package it all into like that same bucket of things that you need to feel it, to heal it. You need to process it. There's going to be layers. There's going to be ties amongst them. But there's just a consistent feeling with many different things in my life. And I'm like, I recognize this as grief.
Yes. Thank you for saying that, because yes, absolutely. As a woman who is divorced, we grieve the end of a relationship, a marriage, right? There's a whole grieving process around major life transitions and losses, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a career that we spent years building, or even a version of ourselves, and relationships with friends even that we grieve. And I also want to say that I also have another name for grief. And for me, that name is love. Like for me, at its root, grief is love, right? And whether it is love for someone you lose or love for someone in the context of a relationship that has come to an end in its current expression, right? And I think that that's so important to remember too, especially in the context of a death, because when you find yourself in grief, remembering that love is the root of your pain and reminding one another that we might have lost that person embodied, right? We might not get to have those physical physical interactions with them that we once had, but we get to absolutely keep all of the love that we feel for them, that they gave us, that lives. And so looking for, healthy ways to express that and honor that is so important, whether it is keeping a picture of that person, somewhere where you can see it sometimes, or something they gave you, or at a family holiday when you've lost someone you love as a family, instead of pretending that they weren't there, taking the time to ask each other, like, hey, like, what do you remember most about mom, right? Like, what did you love that she used to make? Because those are the things that we can do for each other that honor the love. Because I think it's when we feel cut off from the love more than anything that creates so much trauma for us and so much sadness.
Yeah. Keep their memory alive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Love, right? Like it is just an honoring of not just a life, but the love more than anything, I think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So switching gears a little bit to more of the topic around unhappy achieving and this pursuit of external validation, and as it relates to work, as it relates to life. And how did you move away from chasing like that external validation and to trusting more of like your inner worth, and what helped you the most?
Well, I need to say, that in 4 years, every major aspect of my life, with the exception of my 3 children, has changed. So I had gotten to a place where I had checked off all of the boxes of a good girl's and good woman's existence, right? Externally, I had the picture perfect life. I'd done it. And what I realized when I got to that place is it was externally perfect, but it was inwardly broken. It did not feel the fulfillment, the satisfaction, the sense of joy that I thought I would feel when I did all of the things and I had all of the things. And so for me, that was the most striking realization, right? That the answers to the question of what will make me happy were true, actually. And so I had to find out what was true for me. And in order to do that, I had to figure out who I was beneath, the box and the mask and the prescriptions for a good girl. And I had to begin, once I figured out who I was, to deconstruct the life that I had built from the outside in based on expectations, approval, and being very pleasing. And I had to rebuild a life that lit me up from the inside out, right? And so I think that that's really what the book is about, is what does it look like when you've built a life from the outside in, and now you have to build one that aligns with your heart and your soul and your deepest truths and desires that lights you up from the inside out. And I realized that was the only way to create a life of true joy and inner fulfillment for myself, and that it starts here, and then everything outside of me just becomes a physical manifestation of what's going on inside of me. And the freedom to just, for women especially, to create a life that allows you to live so free. You get to be yourself in every expression, whether it is work, whether it is in romantic partnership, whether it is in relationship with your children or your friendships, right? Like that. And most of all, a life that allowing yourself to be in the fullest expression of you in here, right? And so, so that was sort of the realization I had, and I think the journey that me and so many other women are going on who are making changes, big or small, in their lives, courageous changes.
And so, what would you say is the most helpful on that journey that you're talking about? And from the point of view of like, you are trained as a lawyer, right? And whether you're working in corporate or whether you're working as a lawyer, there are like golden handcuffs attached to that, to where you know that if you go to work, you can make money to support your family, you can put food on the table. But is that sucking the life out of you? Yes, maybe. So what is like the most helpful thing that you could tell someone who is like, I don't want to be doing what I'm doing. I did this because this was what I thought I had to do. And I want to blow up my life and I want to try something else that's more fulfilling, but I have to pay rent. I have to get electricity bills paid. Like, what is that balance? Like, what would you tell someone who's just like, I can't, like, I can't?
Mm-hmm. Well, what I would say is, any change you make is a meaningful one, right? So you don't have to go quit your job tomorrow. That isn't possible for you. Right? If it is possible for you and you feel called to do that, then by all means, go for it. And
you told me I could.
But not all of us are able to do that, right? And so, for example, if you are, I'll use the example of the former version of myself, right? A woman who went to law school because I felt like, well, I need to make my family proud. And what makes families proud? Being a doctor or a lawyer. Math and science aren't my strong suits. So I'll go to law school, and hated every minute, every second of my legal education that I worked so hard to obtain. And the same continued even in my work as a lawyer. And I am grateful. I'm very grateful for my legal education and having had that experience. But it was not aligned for me. It did not provide fulfillment. And so if you are the old version of Ashley Jordan and you're working your law job and it looks really good on a resume, but it makes you absolutely miserable, and you're like, hey, I would rather write a book than... If you can't quit your law job yet, start writing your book, right? Because this book was written in, sometimes only an hour a day, if that's all that I had. And many books have been written in an hour a day. And if you don't have an hour a day, then block off 15 minutes a day, right? Because in a year, that will amount to something. So start wherever you're at, because once you start, and this is what I'll tell you, if you are truly following your heart and beginning to walk your path, the path you're called to, you will find that when you make one change, more changes will naturally follow and unfold, and there will be an unfolding of your journey that you can't even see right now. And I think that's both the beauty of, women who are on this path and these and undertaking their own journeys, is that your journey will be unique to you. It will not look like anyone else's. And that's the hard part. Your journey will be unique to you. It will not look like anyone else's. So there are no prescriptions for you. But I promise, if you're following your heart, if you can make even one change, big or small, it will lead to the next and the next to the next. And there will be a natural unfolding of a path for you that will just open. And even when you're unsure, just keep going, because something's sure to happen. Keep going is what I would say.
And it reminds me of something else I made a note about when I was reading your book, is you present the idea that not everything you do has to be in service of the success system. And it kind of reminds me of that too, like that little mantra of like, hey, I could do something just because it's fun. What,
Yeah. So, and that's the thing. So for instance, for me, that led to me taking an improv class last winter, something I never thought I would do. And I absolutely loved it. For 2.5 hours a week, for 8 weeks, I felt effervescent, and I got to play and be silly with 10 strangers. And I met, a very dear friend as a result of that experience. And so it isn't just about, right, changing jobs or changing careers. It's that when you allow yourself to be led by your heart and your inner wisdom and what's calling to you, you will have experiences and even meet people who will prove to be so dear and instrumental to you on your path in ways that you could never expect or imagine.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think something else that really shines in your story that you bring to light, and something that I try to practice myself as well as share with all of my clients, is just the reminder of how important being creative is and how important play is. And that, you felt the mask you had to put on when you were a lawyer was so, even when you were explaining the type of outfit you had to wear, and today, if you could see how cute she is in this really bright pink shirt, like you could just tell, like this, you were not made to be a lawyer. In terms of, I could just tell with the kind of creativity and freedom and how you really wanted to be a writer. And whether you have the golden handcuffs and you have to kind of keep, trudging along and doing what you're doing, if you can find any way of being creative or any way of inviting play into your life, I feel like that's the antidote for a lot of unhappiness, is because this system is very boxed in. And I'm talking corporate, I'm talking law, government, maybe, I don't know, enter in whatever kind of situation you might be stuck in that is sucking the soul out of your life. But I feel like finding, like, whether you, like you said, take 15 minutes to write, paint, dance, do improv class, like those things I think are so important for our well-being, and something that I think really comes out in your story too.
Yes. And yes to everything you said, Alicia. And they lead us down least traveled roads for ourselves. You never know who you might meet. Right? Yeah. You never know what ideas might come from or inspiration might come from doing something that might seem to other people completely nonsensical, like a complete waste of time. But when you start to do things because they bring you joy or because your heart is calling you to do them, you have no idea what that one thing might lead to. Even if it could be the inspiration for a job change that you didn't have before, right? It could be a connection to your purpose work that you didn't know before, or an instrumental or influential person who helps you on your journey or who becomes dear to you. When you are, taking some of those quote nonsensical, least traveled roads, the most beautiful paths open for you, and the most beautiful connections are made manifest for you. Truly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Those are good things to share, and hopefully someone feels inspired to put themselves out there in as many different ways as possible. So a couple more questions I wanted to try to fit in is, I feel like so many women will, after reading your book, will feel very inspired that they have a similar, not the same as yours, but a similar kind of experience with life, to where something triggered a big transformation, was a catalyst for change. It was a catalyst for realizing where they were stuck. And so following on to the power of writing and maybe it being a creative outlet, like how would you encourage women to explore writing, to put their experience down on paper and share their journey?
So, the power of story, I think personal story, personal narrative cannot be underestimated, because, it's the reason that I do what I do. And even though, I'll be introduced as an author, as a speaker, what I really consider myself to be more than anything else is a storyteller, right? And so although I might use different mediums, it's all about the power of personal story, personal narrative. And story is a sacred art form for a reason, because even though the facts and circumstances of our lives may differ, no human experience is truly unique. And thank goodness, because it allows us to see ourselves in one another's stories and find hope and healing and inspiration. And more than anything, it lets us know that we're not alone. And so for me, writing my stories in a way that is as authentic, as real, as raw as possible is critical, because even though other women on this journey might not know me, may have never met me, if I do my job right and they're reading my book, they can feel me, and they will know that they have a friend, that they have someone who sees them, who believes in them, who knows there's nothing wrong with them. They are not crazy and they are not alone. And that is the purpose of this book and the reason that I do what I do. And so as far as storytelling for women, the power of telling your story in any medium, whether it is writing, whether it is speaking it to others, because I think that whether we're writing it or speaking it, I think so many women are craving real stories, real authentic stories from other women. And so whether it's journaling in your journal to yourself and writing from, a place of purity in your heart and your soul, or whether it is finding a circle of women who will hold you in a safe space, who will allow you to share honestly and authentically, and who will share with you, because that exchange of story between women, I have to tell you, because I am privileged enough to bear witness to that beautiful exchange between women that happens when one woman is brave enough to speak candidly about her own story, is that other women feel like, hey, if she can be honest and real, then I can too. And the magic that happens for women in the space of storytelling and exchanging their stories with one another, and the wisdom and the inspiration and the hope and the healing that happens is incredible. And I tell women, I have availed myself of many amazing healing modalities, and I've been fortunate enough to have many healers who've helped me on my path. But more than anything, who helps me every day, it is the circle of wise women that I get to be in relationship with on a regular basis. And it can be as simple as one sentence, one piece of wisdom from one of those women in my life that immediately shifts something in me, helps me change my perspectives, helps me see something in a different way and find healing there, right? And it costs nothing, right? It is a relationship, it is authenticity, and it is an exchange of holding space for story and sharing personal story.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Do I have time to ask one more question?
Absolutely do. Yes.
Okay. One of the things that this just brought up that I had on my list of questions to ask you about earlier, and we'll close with this, and then you can let everyone know when your book is launching and where people can find you, because I definitely want to end with that. But you talk a lot about relationships, and what you just said right there was, now you really feel like you're surrounded by really awesome women that you feel can hold space for you well, and can be honest with you, and you can share stories. And so talk a little bit about that and how you found your people. Like how did it, because I felt like you talk a lot in your book about endings of relationships and, relationships that had run their course, and you talk beautifully around that. And now you have your people. So how does one gracefully let old friendships go and come into new relationships with really more aligned people?
Mm-hmm. So this is one thing, Alicia, that I hear from so many women, is that they're looking for their sisters. They're looking for their people and really authentic, deep, meaningful relationships with women. And I have to tell you that for the majority of my life, until, the past 4 years, I had extremely painful relationships with women, both in my maternal lineage and in my female friendships. And I think so many of us as women are raised, I always think of the Girl Scout song, "Make new friends, but keep the old. One is silver and the other's gold." And yes, that is true. I have a friend who's known me since elementary school, who knew Daniel, who knows that expression of me. And that's beautiful, right? I hold that very close, and it is a sacred relationship to me. She knows me in a way most other people in my life don't. And she's seen every iteration and expression and age of me. But not everyone is meant to be with us forever, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's really hard for a lot of women because we're conditioned to think otherwise. And so if a friendship ends, if people leave our lives, we think that there's something wrong with us. At least that's what I thought. I would think to myself, what's wrong with me? Why doesn't she like me anymore? What did I do? Right? And the answer is there's, again, nothing wrong with you. I think to myself, what I've learned is that, especially when we are on these journeys of transformation, right? You're changing the expression of yourself in the world. And so some relationships that you formed in a different expression of you, you in that way had a co-resonance with somebody, right? But when your expression shifts and evolves, and even though it's more like you may feel like a stranger to some of the people in your lives, and you may not share the same co-resonance. So it doesn't have to be that you're right, they're wrong, you're right, or that there's anything wrong with them or anything wrong with you. It can simply be we don't have co-resonance anymore, and that's okay, because I can still honor what we've shared, and I can let you go in love. And for me, when some of those friendships fell away, and I want to say the learning came subsequent to the loss of some of those relationships, because in the moment I was like holding on with both hands, like, don't leave me, it's fine, right? Like, yeah. I'm better than I was before, like, right? Yeah. And so what I realized afterward is that it was truly in the best interest of both of us for those relationships to fall away. And as soon as they did, Alicia, here's the thing. As soon as those relationships fell away, there was space in my life for other people to come in. And those people, when they found me, saw the real me, because that's how I was showing up in the world. They saw my heart. They saw the expression of me that is the truest and most authentic. And they loved me for that. And they were magnetized to me because of that. We were reflecting the beautiful aspects of who we are back to each other. And those relationships, like, I truly did not know how fulfilling, how beautiful, how unconditionally loving relationships between women truly can be. And I know that now. And I will say that living some of the stories in this book and being down on my knees, at the end of the day, it was women who saved me. It was my sisters who held me when I was down on the ground and said, we are here. You are not alone. And whatever you need to get back up, we've got you. And that, we're taught that, circling back to even what we were talking about earlier about biological family, right? We're taught that unconditional love only exists from the people that we share genetic links to. And that is not true. In fact, sometimes the people we are genetically related to cannot offer us that kind of love. And so even though we learn to, nurture and nourish ourselves, it doesn't mean we have to go without. It just means we might have to expand our definition of family and sisters and what that looks like for us, and create that in the context of other relationships. And for me, I've been fortunate enough to be able to do that in my relationships with women. And that's why this book is dedicated to the women who saved me, right? To my soul sisters, and to every woman on this journey, every woman daring to live a bigger, bolder life and live as her truest, most authentic expression, and ultimately live free.
You're such a babe, Ashley. That was like such a perfect ending. And I know that as including myself, which I told you, every woman that reads your book feels like she is your soul sister. So I was like, I sent her this email and I'm like, stage 5 clinger. Anyways, we're best friends. But yeah, you are just so awesome. The book, and we just scraped the surface. I could have kept on going. I didn't even cover all the questions I had, but such a wonderful conversation. So in ending, when does the book launch, the date? So this might come out a little bit after. And where can people find it? Where can people find you? Tell us all the deets.
Yes. So you can find me at ashjordan, ashjordan.com. You can also simply go to unhappyachiever.com. But also the book is available, in every normal channel, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all of those, normal traditional channels where you go to buy books. Mm-hmm. And I'm always open to doing events. And when I do, I bring books. And, and to your point, though, Alicia, about your message to me, which I hope, and I still am holding so close to my heart, because truly, the purpose of my work is to uplift and inspire women to live, their biggest, boldest lives, and to help use my stories to help them illuminate their own paths forward, right? Their own journeys of unbecoming, to be the fullest, most powerful expressions of themselves in the world. And so because that purpose to support women and their journeys is so near and dear to my heart, every woman to me is a sister. No woman is a stranger. And so that is the spirit with which I write, and that is the spirit with which I interact with every woman I meet, because I truly feel that in my heart and my soul. And that is the kind of world that I want to co-create alongside you and every other woman for us and our daughters.
Oh, I love it. Mission accomplished. Thank you so much for the beautiful conversation, for being here and spending a little bit of extra time with me. I know it went over. Thank you so much, and we will talk soon.
Thank you, Alicia. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Humanize the Hustle podcast. If you would like to get in touch with the show, email me at myalchemylife@gmail.com or follow me on Instagram at Wellness with Alicia. And if you like the show, please share it with someone you love and make sure and give us a 5-star review. Talk to you next time, and remember, health and happiness is non-negotiable.